I suppose it's good afternoon now, and I have to congratulate Startup Turkey, because I live in Antalya, and the fact they actually managed to find a fireplace is quite impressive. In fact, I think we should call it a barbecue chat.
Yeah, it is. We know what it is, at least.
Before I start talking to Emre, following on from the previous speaker about listening rather than always talking, I originally came to the event as a participant. And so yesterday I went to the networking event, and I was absolutely amazed. I didn't say a word for the first 5 people. You know, they just went, bum, 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 my business card. So just think about what he told you. When I was talking to Emre yesterday, we came across very many similar thoughts about the way that business is going. And so, yes, we will talk about his business, but more importantly about some of the ways that we see things going. Yeah. So perhaps you'd like to start by telling us a bit about how you got to where you are and a bit about the business you have.
Yeah, actually, thank you for having me, by the way. I started my career 16 years ago at a bank. I feel like I'm still a banker doing fintech. This is so important. When I was started back then 2004 at Guarantee Payment Systems, actually we had an opportunity to build the whole payment ecosystem for e-commerce players when the market are not saturated. It is so important because even the big players like eBay, Sahibi, and Hepsiburada.com from the market were so small. They need something to be covered by the banks. That's why we started building something to cover their needs. And I had this opportunity to see how the market evolves from back then till now. Then I spent almost 13 years by dealing just the vertical payment, online payments in the market. And for the last 5 years, almost 6 years, the Naspers PayU found me to be able to penetrate the PayU businesses to Turkey, which is a payment service provider. Then I started at PayU, which is one of the first fintech companies in the country, actually.
And what has been your approach to PayU in the way in which you actually developed the business in Turkey?
Actually, as Naspers, we do believe in that creating an ecosystem from scratch for those emerging markets we are running. As Naspers, because we are running more than 130 countries, that's so important. We have a reflex for emerging markets, which we call it high growth markets, by the way, for the last 2 years. So actually we do believe in that if you leverage the ecosystem from scratch by building some value-added services for e-commerce players and online shoppers to enable them to shop online from Turkey or abroad, so important. Then we started as PayU. We built the first PSP in the market. Actually, it was very hard times because we were teaching everyone what the PSPs look like in the market, how the market will evolve for the last 3 years or 5 years, etc. We spent almost 1 year to convince everyone to build the first PSP in the market. Then we got lots of great followers. You heard about EasyCo today. They got great job. If you ask me, 30 millions, it's a great opportunity for us to move further from the country. And we started doing business here in Turkey as well. So if you look at the PayUdo, we are treating ourselves as a multi-local company, by the way. We are not local, we are not global as well. Because wherever we are in 16 countries currently. We are just going there, we are just focusing the local needs to fix them first. Then we put everything within the same API with just one agreement and pricing scheme for the local companies and the global ones as well. Actually, that's the sweet spot what we have as PayU. This is one of the reasons why we got Facebook in Nigeria, why we started processing Uber in South Africa. Then we rolled this out to the other countries we run as well. As a merchant, you need lots of payment-related issues if you sell online, which is obvious that. And you need a partner to fix it with just one API for all around the world. This is so important. That's why being a global is the key, and acting local, also the biggest sweet spot what we have currently. Then at the end of that, we have currently more than 250K online merchants, actually from all around the world. India is growing very fast, for instance. We started investing into the fintech companies. For instance, we just invested in Citrus Pay and Zen's Money in India. Just happened 2 months ago, and we spent almost 140 million US there. And now we are closing another deal in LATAM That's a fintech 2.0, as we discussed, because we are 15 years companies, and we need to be evolved as well. Because the world is changing, we need to disrupt even ourselves. This is what we are thinking in PayU and Naspers. Naspers is 100 years ago. That's a dinosaur, can adapt. That's so important. That's why we are investing. We are trying to do businesses, new kind of businesses for everyone, and we put all of them, give it a try, and expand it globally. This is what we are trying to do in PayU.
But it's interesting, you talk about mixing with other products almost, in a sort of cooperative way.
Yes, it is.
Is that the way that you're actually trying to develop the business?
Yes, it is in our DNA, actually, speaking of the Naspers, because we are the part of Naspers, and we have lots of sister companies. One of them is Tencent. Probably you heard about Tencent, one of the biggest investments, actually lucky investments we have done 16 years ago. Probably you heard about Tencent, but Tencent is currently more than 200 billion US, one of the biggest companies in the world. And as Naspers, we are still holding 35% of that. And we just invested 30 million US 16 years ago. It is one of the biggest and best investments in the world. And if you have such revenue generator, then you start investing such companies from all around the world. You invested OLX, you invested Letgo. Actually, Letgo is one of the, the latest unicorn we made. It is 1 billion US currently, and it is competing with OLX. It is competing with the conventional classified as well. When I say conventional, I'm not talking about physical stores or something like that. Conventional is internet itself, and the new kind of things is mobile and the new way of doing businesses, sharing the things in messenger apps, etc. This is happening. We need to adapt. We are trying to give some services like we do with WeChat in China. We are implementing something there, and 900 million people, 900 million, 700 million unique, by the way, active people are using it and transacting billions of transactions on a weekly basis. So that's the idea, actually. We create platforms for everyone.
So you don't see your future model as a pure competitive against the next guy who's doing the same thing?
No, being competitive is, if you just talk about the price, is ridiculous, unfortunately. If you have such new kind of services that you can enable, leverage the markets itself, then you are competitive, actually. I mean, being the biggest doesn't make any sense to me and to PayU as well. Being the best is what we are chasing currently. That's why we are focusing on that kind of services by cooperating with other financial services like MasterCard, Visa, acquirers, issuers. If we are talking about Turkey, it is Interbankar Center as well, because they have great networks. We cannot build that network from scratch. It is not sustainable. Then we can cooperate with them to move further. Half of the population is still unbanked. The market is so grown. We can go everywhere together. It is too early to compete with someone else. This is happening in Turkey as well. We are not competing with anyone.
But do you see this as a trend as we move forward, say over the next 10 years, that businesses become more cooperative, working together to get a better product rather than necessarily going out and trying to kill the man next door?
It is a great strategy if you have a clear go-to-market timeline, roadmap, etc., whatever it is. Because it is cheap, you start doing business just in 2 months or 3 months instead of building something from scratch. You go there, you start learning, you deepen your relationship between those people. I mean, you started cooperating. If you have enough money, if you have Naspers behind or something like that, then you can go further, investing to them, taking them to their another steps, expanding their businesses to other countries as well. This is what we are doing currently. We start doing something in Latin America, for instance, in Argentina. We give it a try. We learn how it works. We put it into our API. Then we try it in Turkey as well. If it goes very well, then we start negotiating with those guys. Okay, let's invest into you to expand it as a PayU brand in other countries we run as well. This is the way what we are doing currently.
Interesting. We've seen a lot of businesses here over the last couple of days. I mean, we saw 50 yesterday. Have you got any thoughts on the businesses that you've seen and whether there are things that you would say to them that would actually be of benefit to them?
Yeah, I like some of them. They need a strategic partner, first of all, instead money. Money can be found from everywhere, but if you have a strategic partner holding money, which is better, of course, then you can expand your business, then you can get that scale, can be monetized by you to move forward. This is so important. They need to focus on their businesses. They need to see, they need to be aware of that. People are changing a lot, especially for the new generations. You know, it is not about the technologies itself. The main driver is the consumer. It's always happening like that. Technology is just a tool that are being shaped by the consumers itself. They need to understand that. Then, if they have a strategic partner to move forward, I see that lots of them go somewhere else as well, which is so important.
Yeah. Yes, I was quite interested yesterday watching them myself, that we had, goodness knows how many times, million, billion, and trillion came out. And I sometimes felt that there was a need to focus more, because if you say your market is the world, I've always believed if you try and sell to everybody, you'll end up selling to nobody.
Yes, it is. And they need to actually start finishing and stop starting. This is so obvious. They need to get things done to move forward. Otherwise, they are just losing their focus, which is what we see.
Yes, I mean, I remember a business I worked with that came up with a wonderful product, which was a lamp that fitted on the end of policemen's batons, because unfortunately they had the problem that they would go out with the new batons and they'd have their torch in the other hand and suddenly realize they couldn't arrest anybody. And great gadget.
Yes.
But they lost the market because they were all engineers, and they spent an eternity trying to get another 2 grams off the weight. And meantime, somebody else came into the market and did the same thing. And
by just focusing, which is so important.
Yeah.
And adapting.
Yeah. And along with the strategic partner, you know, I think a good mentor at this stage is also critical to them.
Yes, definitely it is. And we have a lot in Turkey, for instance, and in Central Eastern Europe or the other countries, we have lots of good mentors as well, but they need to listen to somebody, because networking is, we know how the networking should look like, which is so important. I always believe in that you need to start at the corporate companies first. It is so obvious from my perspective of view. You need to get your network from there, which is more important for me. Because you start working together, you start learning, you start spending someone else's money. It is not your money, which is so important. You do some failures, you get some failures with someone else's money. Then when you go out, you learn something that can be useful for you, for your own businesses, which is so important for me.
And the other thing that I noticed yesterday was a lot of emphasis on what the competition can't do, which I understand if you're trying to sell to an investor, you're trying to show a gap in the market. But again, I think if you're actually wanting to succeed, you should also focus on what your competitors can do, because I've yet to find a competitor that will sell on their weaknesses. They will always sell on their strengths.
Definitely.
So, but any final thoughts? Because we could be really nice and finish slightly early so these people can get to lunch.
Yeah, it's just before the lunch. That's why we need to be aware.
So we could ingratiate ourselves that way. Have you got a final thought for the people that are sitting out there?
We always think that everything is changing. I mean, if you ask me to talk about 10 years later, I cannot. But I can give something a try to see what's going to be happening. If we go back 10 years ago, probably we cannot imagine how the world will look like today. We just realized that we are maybe not alone, just 7 universities, you know, a few days ago. Something is happening because of the people. They need to listen to people to build something. Instead, we are not Steve Jobs or something like that. It's happening just out of 1,000 or something like that. That's why we need to listen to people. We need to cover their needs somehow, being the best, not being the biggest. Then we need to be able to scale their business. We need to, of course, plan it in advance, then go further. Instead of doing something locally, they need to think about it globally. And yeah, go
and
fast.
As we were talking yesterday, just 2 little things. First of all, the fact that if you're going into a business, it's good to have a problem that you're solving rather than a solution where you're looking for a client.
Definitely.
And I deliberately put on my thing when I arrived here that my favorite quote was, "Remember the bumblebee." And perhaps we can finish that. The reason I say that is the bumblebee, if you go to university and you study aerodynamics, you will discover that the bumblebee is the wrong shape. It weighs too much, it's too heavy, its wings are too small, and it flaps them too slowly. In other words, it cannot fly, and yet it does for two reasons. Firstly, because it did not go to university and study aerodynamics for 3 years, but more importantly, because he thought he could.
Yeah.
And I would say to the people out there, if they think they can, then go fly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agree. Thank you.